Have you ever imagined one morning you're on your way to work like any other day, and within minutes the whole world turns its back on you? They call you a criminal. They humiliate you. They handcuff you. Right in front of the very courthouse where you've protected justice for 20 long years. This is a true story about Judge Kesha Williams, a woman who was humiliated and beaten by the very system she served, simply because of her skin color and because of prejudice. But she didn't fall. She rose again and made the entire world bow before true justice. Watch till the end, because the ending of this story will make you believe that justice may be blindfolded, but her heart always sees. If you love inspiring stories about strength, courage, and faith in what's right, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss stories that touch the heart. Like today's story, Justice Hits Back When Justice Returns. That morning, the sky was covered with a thin mist, like a mourning veil. Kesha Williams stood silently before the district courthouse, where she had once delivered thousands of sentences in the name of justice. The early wind blew gently, carrying the cold, metallic scent of steel and concrete. On the bronze plaque above the gate, the engraved words shimmered in the dim light. The Honorable Judge K. Williams presiding. That name had once been her lifelong pride. Now, it hung quietly on the wall of a place that was denying the very person who bore it. Her wrists were cuffed. Her left cheek was bruised and swollen. They had just called her a suspect, a disturbing woman, an imposter attempting to infiltrate a government building. Justice had never felt so cold, and ironically, she was the one who knew every corner of it best. Inside the courthouse, Officer Martinez adjusted his collar, cleared his throat, and began his usual performance. He had done this many times, telling the story his way, shaping public opinion, turning himself into the hero. He knew how to make his words smooth, how to make the system nod along. "Your Honor," he began, steady and confident. "I was conducting a routine security inspection when I discovered a suspicious individual attempting to breach a restricted area." He glanced at the defendant's table. Kesha sat there, hands cuffed, hair messy, half covering her face, a dry streak of blood under her chin. He continued, his tone laced with disdain. "She behaved erratically, failed to provide identification, and when I asked her to cooperate, she became aggressive, even attempted to attack me." The acting judge, Mr. Harrison, nodded slightly, signaling him to go on. Martinez smiled, growing more confident. She was also carrying numerous documents that appeared to be internal court records, possibly stolen materials. "I was simply doing my duty, Your Honor." In the audience, a few court employees nodded faintly, eyes empty. They had heard stories like this too many times before. A woman of color panicking, and the story rewritten so that she became the threat. "Your Honor," Martinez said, "this isn't the first time I've encountered people like her. They always claim to be lawyers, judges, politicians, anything to escape blame. But I'm well aware of that trick." A faint smirk crossed his lips. The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of the stenographer typing. Each word, each lie etched into record as if it were truth. Kesha sat still. She didn't react, didn't argue. But her eyes, steady, unblinking, seemed to carve every word, every second into memory. She claimed she was at work, Martinez said with a shrug and a sneer. But she had no documents, no proof whatsoever. And when stopped, she shouted, accusing me of racism. Prosecutor Walsh nodded, joining in. Your Honor, this is a common tactic among agitators. They try to turn law enforcement into a racial issue. Each lie spread like poisonous mist, soft but seeping deep. In that room, everyone believed what they were used to believing. The police are always right. And people like her, always wrong. Kesha bowed her head slightly, her slender shoulders trembling. But it wasn't fear, it was anger. A quiet, deep anger, like fire burning beneath ice. Martinez went on. She resisted. I had to use minimal necessary force. I have video evidence, though unfortunately my body cam malfunctioned this morning. The room sighed, nodding in sympathy. A technical issue. The kind that always happened when it needed to. Kesha raised her head, her voice calm, almost chilling. How convenient that your camera malfunctioned today. The room turned. What did you say? Judge Harrison asked. Nothing, Your Honor, she replied with a faint smile. But that smile made Martinez's spine go cold. The hearing continued, and the more Martinez spoke, the more he believed he was winning. He didn't know that every word he uttered was a noose tightening around his own neck. When the prosecution finished, Harrison turned to her. Does the defendant wish to speak? Kesha stood. The sound of chains echoed sharply. She took a deep breath, lifting her chin. Her voice rang out, not loud, but clear, each word striking the air. Thank you, Your Honor. I have a few clarifications to make. The room froze. That was not the voice of fear or rage. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being heard. Kesha stepped forward, light from the window illuminating the bruises on her cheek. First, she said, I did not enter any restricted area. I was on a public sidewalk at 8:47 a.m. And according to the Supreme Court ruling in HGV's Committee for Industrial Organization, a public sidewalk is a place where citizens have a lawful right to be. A soft murmur spread through the room. A suspect had just quoted the U.S. Supreme Court with perfect precision. Harrison frowned slightly, looking at her more closely. Second, Kesha continued calmly. Regarding the documents Officer Martinez claims were stolen, they are internal court files, memos, and administrative correspondence. I am authorized to possess them as part of my professional capacity. And that profession is what exactly? Harrison asked skeptically. Kesha smiled faintly, eyes sharp as glass. Williams, she said. Dr. Kesha Williams. And perhaps we can discuss my occupation later, Your Honor. A long silence fell. Martinez felt his heartbeat quicken. Something was very wrong. Kesha looked directly at him. You stated your body cam malfunctioned. I'd like to remind you of Rule 106 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which allows the court to compel complete data production. This courthouse is surrounded by high-resolution security cameras, all of which automatically back up their footage. Her voice was steady. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Martinez froze. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. She continued, "I request the court issue an order to preserve all video footage from this morning, between 8:45 and 9:05 a.m., including surveillance, body cam backups, and any recorded evidence from the scene." Prosecutor Walsh shot up. "Objection! The defendant has no legal counsel." Kesha turned to him, her calm gaze cutting through the air. "Your Honor, the Sixth Amendment permits self-representation, and Brady v. Maryland requires the prosecution to preserve any potentially exculpatory evidence." The room fell utterly silent. Harrison leaned back, studying the woman in handcuffs before him. She didn't tremble. She didn't falter. She was running the courtroom, not standing trial. "You seem well acquainted with the law, Miss Williams," Harrison said quietly. Kesha nodded slightly. "I have some experience." She walked to the evidence table, picked up the confiscated folder. "This is my work schedule, confirming I was assigned to this courthouse at 9 a.m. today." From the gallery, a security guard named Henderson, who had served the court for over a decade, suddenly stopped breathing. He recognized that face. There was no mistake. "Officer Martinez claimed I called myself someone important," Kesha continued, "but I never said that. I was simply trying to hand him my identification, which he never bothered to look at." She reached into her jacket pocket and slowly pulled out a black leather wallet. Light flashed off the golden metal inside. Engraved on it, the seal of the United States Federal Court. The room froze solid. "I believe," Kesha said slowly, "there's been a serious misunderstanding about whom Officer Martinez assaulted this morning." She opened the wallet and held the badge high for all to see. No one spoke. Harrison's mouth fell open. Henderson trembled, hands clutching his head. Martinez stepped back. Then again, as if the ground beneath him were collapsing. On the gleaming golden badge were the engraved words, "United States Federal Judge, Kesha Williams." After 15 minutes of recess, the courtroom was no longer the same place. The gray-white walls that had witnessed thousands of trials now seemed to whisper, trembling, as if waiting for something momentous to happen. No one inside knew they were about to witness a moment that would become history. In a small waiting room behind the court, Kesha Williams stood before the mirror. She saw herself. The bruised face, the wrinkled shirt, the weary eyes. But within those eyes, she also saw the reflection of the woman who once sat upon the high bench. The one who had guarded justice with unshakable faith. Her trembling hand reached out and touched the judge's robe Henderson had brought her. Smooth black fabric trimmed with gold, the symbol of power, and more than that, the symbol of faith in what is right. "Thank you, Henderson." Her voice was soft, yet heavy with meaning. "When I walk out there, you know what to say, don't you?" Henderson swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." "Your what?" Kesha lifted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. The Honorable Judge Kesha Williams presiding. The door opened. The echo of security boots resounded down the hall. The courtroom was packed. Everyone stood in silence, as if awaiting something sacred. Then Henderson's voice rang out, deep, clear, commanding, sending a shiver through the room, All rise. Court is now back in session. The Honorable Judge, Kesha Williams, presiding. The judge's chamber door opened. Kesha stepped out. Light from the doorway glinted along the gold trim of her robe, casting a halo around her. The woman who had been assaulted that morning now wore once again the symbol of justice, walking through utter silence. Acting Judge Harrison turned pale and quickly stood. Your Honor. Kesha gave a small nod, her voice calm but edged with steel. Thank you for presiding temporarily. You may step down now. I will take it from here. Harrison bowed his head and left quietly, like a man bearing guilt. The door closed. Only Kesha, Martinez, and Justice, returned at last, remained. Martinez was still standing, face drained of color, mouth open but speechless. Kesha sat down in the judge's chair, her chair, the same one he had mocked the owner of just hours earlier. You may sit, Officer Martinez. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of divine command. Martinez stumbled into his seat, hands trembling, sweat dripping onto the table. Kesha looked at him for a long time. About 2 hours ago, you stood right here and swore to tell the truth. Do you remember what you said? Martinez stayed silent. You said people like me always pretend to be lawyers, judges, just to escape punishment. You said we needed to be taught a lesson, didn't you? Martinez swallowed and gave a small, shaking nod. Kesha turned on the tablet before her, tapping the screen lightly. It lit up, and with it his face, and the truth. You said your camera malfunctioned, but I have news for you, Officer Martinez. Technology doesn't lie like humans do. She pressed a button. Footage appeared, crystal clear, sound sharp. The room held its breath. The video showed Kesha in plain clothes walking through the courthouse gate. Then Martinez approached, his voice dripping with contempt. Another sewer rat trying to crawl into the courthouse. A violent slap. Her head snapped to the side. Blood hit the concrete. Then he grabbed her by the throat, sneering, "Filthy animal. Your place is in a cage, not here." Gasps filled the courtroom. Someone covered their mouth. Someone else turned away, unable to look. Kesha paused the video. Do you see me resisting anywhere, Officer Martinez? No answer? Or do you only see yourself attacking an innocent woman? She played another clip, a backup from his own body cam, automatically uploaded to the county server. Martinez's voice echoed, cruel and cold. Look at her. Who does she think she is? Let's remind her where she belongs. Silence crushed the room. Prosecutor Walsh lowered his gaze, his hands trembling. Rodriguez and Thompson, the two officers who had testified, bowed their heads in shame. Kesha turned to them. You both swore that Martinez acted professionally. Do you stand by that statement? No one spoke. Silence, she said softly, is still an answer. She set the tablet down and rose to her feet. Her voice was steady, but every word struck like fire. This morning, I was handcuffed on the very steps of the courthouse I've presided over for 23 years. And you, Officer Martinez, struck me, humiliated me, and fabricated your report. You didn't just assault a woman, you assaulted justice itself. Martinez opened his mouth to speak, but Kesha raised a hand. Don't. It's my turn to speak now. She pulled out a thick folder and slammed it onto the desk. For the past 15 years, you've been the subject of 47 complaints, 7 for excessive force, 9 for civil rights violations, dozens for assault, all dismissed. Why? Because this system believed you. She flipped through the pages, her voice low and sharp. 2009, Mrs. Rosa Delgado, age 63, nose broken after asking for your badge number. 2012, Shamal Washington, honor student, framed with narcotics. 2016, Dr. Michael Johnson, arrested on his doorstep for being black. Martinez slumped, shaking uncontrollably. Kesha's voice softened, but carried deeper weight. All those people were called liars, but today you've confirmed the truth for them yourself. She stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. You told me to know my place. Now let me tell you yours. I am the one who holds the scales of justice. And you, Officer Martinez, you are the man who tipped them. Her voice rose, her eyes blazing. You think justice is blind? No. Justice has been waiting for someone brave enough to make her open her eyes. She raised the wooden gavel, once a symbol of order, now the weapon of truth. You said actions have consequences. I agree. And now you will face yours. 3 strikes echoed like thunder. Bang! 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 Kesha's voice was unwavering, but filled with gravity as she pronounced, Richard Martinez, you are found guilty of assault, obstruction of justice, violation of civil rights, and perjury. You are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without parole. All cases you were involved in will be reopened, so those you wronged may finally speak. Martinez broke down, sobbing, but no one pitied him. His tears had come far too late. Kesha took a deep breath, looking around the courtroom. Those who had once stayed silent now bowed their heads. Those who had once looked away now wept. Her voice softened, carrying through the still air. Justice is not the gavel, the robe, or the courtroom. Justice is what people do when they stand up, even if they must stand alone. Light fell across her face, the bruise on her cheek glowing like a scar of triumph. And in that moment, no one saw a beaten black woman. They saw the embodiment of justice itself, tender and fierce. 6 months after that fateful day, the name of Judge Kesha Williams had become a symbol of justice and courage. The story of the woman who was once handcuffed right in front of her own courthouse was now told everywhere like an epic of heroism. Meanwhile, in a distant federal prison, Richard Martinez sat in a narrow cell, his lifeless eyes staring at the gray sky. No longer in a police uniform, no longer with that arrogant gaze, he was left only with silence and long nights filled with one repeated sentence. I was just doing my job. But he knew well, the only job he ever did right was forcing justice to awaken. After the case, the entire system was shaken. The federal investigation initiated by Judge Williams exposed what had been hidden for years. 12 officers were dismissed, 4 commanding officers were prosecuted, and hundreds of cases were reopened. More than 400 people wrongfully arrested by Martinez were exonerated. Many had lost their youth in prison. Many had lost their faith. When they were released, no one cheered. There were only tears and a quiet sentence that echoed. Justice has come, late, but it has come. Kesha's name appeared across the headlines, but she never sought glory. She only wanted to correct the mistakes made by the very system she once believed in. Standing before hundreds of law students, she spoke softly but firmly. Justice doesn't live inside the courtroom. It begins when you dare to say no to what's wrong, even when the whole world stays silent. Her words made the entire hall rise, not because of her fame, but because they saw in her the image of a survivor of justice. The government enacted unprecedented reforms. Every police officer was required to wear a body cam with automatic backup. Every accusation of violence had to be independently investigated, and every citizen, no matter who they were, had the right to be seen and heard. The courthouse where it all began was renamed the Kesha Williams Federal Courthouse, and at its gate, a bronze plaque read, "Here, justice was once silenced, but here, she found her voice." Each morning, sunlight struck those words, gleaming like a vow. The young clerk who once witnessed the trial became a human rights lawyer. When asked why, she simply smiled, "Because I saw justice stand up, and justice had the face of a woman." The video of that trial became a lesson in every law school and police academy. Not to condemn anyone, but to remind them that truth does not fear the light. One afternoon, Kesha walked through the park near the courthouse. A little girl ran up to her, eyes bright as stars, and asked, "Are you the lady who caught the bad cops?" Kesha bent down, gently patted her head, and smiled. "No, sweetheart, I just reminded them of the law. When I grow up, I want to be like you." "You will," she said, "because justice doesn't need permission, only someone brave enough to believe." As the sun set, Kesha stood watching the last rays fall on the courthouse steps where she once fell. The bruise on her cheek had faded, but she could still feel its warmth. Not pain anymore, but strength. In her office, she placed the wooden gavel softly on the desk. On its handle were engraved the words, "Justice is blind, but she sees all." Outside the window, moonlight washed over the city, calm and clear. She smiled and whispered, "I'm still here." Her story spread everywhere, not just as a case, but as a reminder. Justice may be blindfolded, but her heart still sees. Justice may fall, but there will always be someone, a woman, an ordinary person, who stands up, wipes away the dust, and rekindles the light. And sometimes, that light only needs one believer to shine bright enough for the whole world. What would you think if one day the protector of justice became its victim? If you were Kesha Williams, humiliated, beaten, and handcuffed right in front of your own courthouse, would you stay silent or stand up the way she did? How many of us have witnessed injustice and turned away just because we thought, "It's not my problem"? Is justice truly blind, or have we simply closed our eyes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes even the smallest voice can reignite faith in what's right. And if you believe that the truth always deserves to be heard, if you want to walk alongside stories of faith, courage, and justice, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. Every week, we'll bring you stories that help you believe a little more in humanity and remind you that no matter how deep the darkness, the light always finds its way back. Because justice isn't just the law. Justice is us. See you in the next story.